The following compilation features unsettling and spine-chilling tales sourced from Reddit's horror communities. Reader discretion is strongly advised. These narratives may contain graphic descriptions, psychological distress, and themes that could unsettle sensitive individuals. Proceed with caution, as immersion into these eerie stories may provoke fear, unease, and sleep disturbances. Enter this realm of Reddit's creepy horror stories at your own risk, as the line between reality and the macabre may blur within these chilling narratives. Story 1. I was a security guard at an island where the global elites meet to sacrifice to the ancient gods. After high school, having no better ideas, I joined the Navy SEALs. I never really liked any of it, but it was a job. After all, I loved the guns and airplanes and grenades, but having to run all the time while some scumbag with a chip on his shoulder yells in my face isn't my idea of fun. Things got a lot more interesting after my term of service ended. I still had a high security clearance, so I used it to take temporary jobs as a mercenary, a hired gun. I did some stints in Iraq with Blackwater, where they set me out in the middle of the desert. A watchtower and oil refinery loomed over the burning sands, along with a few other guys. They told us, guard this area with your life. While better than the SEALs, working for Blackwater was extremely boring. The other mercenaries and I would mostly just chain smoke cigarettes and drink coffee all night, staring out across the dead, empty desert. Over time, I worked my way up. Things started to get more interesting when a job offer arrived in my email one freezing cold winter's morning. This is what it said. Mr. Chase, I am the head of security for a private group of entrepreneurs and investors. Through some mutual contacts, I have heard of your professionalism and experience. We are currently putting together a small crew to guard a private event on Redacted Island out in the Pacific Ocean that will run from January 9th to January 26th. Would you be interested in this job? The pay rate is $900 a day. Once you are on the island, it will be impossible to leave until the period of employment has ended. If you are interested, please respond to this email as soon as possible. Sincerely, Mario Antonin, Head of Security. I was working piecemeal jobs like this one at the time, but none of them were paying that well. At most, I would usually get $350 to $500 a day, which was still good money when I was working 7 days a week until the job finished. I instantly responded and said that yes, I was interested. In response, they sent me a non-disclosure agreement that was the size of a small novel that I had to sign. That was how I found myself on a private jet, flying out to an island in the middle of the vast blue ocean. I was never told the coordinates of the island or saw it on a map. It was all kept very secret. A few hours later, we landed on a private airstrip. I looked out the window of the jet, seeing the tropical waters of the Pacific Ocean stretching off to the horizon in every direction. Below me stood an island with palm trees and sandy white beaches. An enormous Victorian mansion loomed directly in the center of it all. The mansion was painted black and looked like something straight out of a horror movie. It had no windows, and the turrets spiraled into blade-like points. That was my first inkling that something might not be quite right about this trip. As the stairs from the private jet descended, I looked out on this strange new world. Employees waited to greet us, looking like beaten dogs. Some had their heads down, their eyes blankly scanning the ground. Most of them were women wearing red dresses, reminding me of stewardesses on a plane. The jet strip was surrounded by palm trees and tropical brush. The chirping of insects sounded all around us, high and resonant. I saw a strange patch engraved on all of the employees' uniforms and jackets. It looked almost like a stick figure drawing of a man, the bottom of its body ending in a C. Its arms were long and jointed, almost spidery. 3 symbols, like repeated iron crosses, connected to the left side of its body in a line. I wondered if it was the logo of some company. I put it out of my mind for now, but I would see that symbol again all over the island, painted on the sides of the mansion and even cut into the trees with a knife. It would only be later that night that I realized its connection to Moloch. "Good day, sir, and welcome to the island," the server on my left said with glassy eyes and a fake smile plastered across her face. They all looked up at once, but it was like the workers all looked through me rather than at me. Their eyes looked flat and dead, like the painted-on eyes of a doll. "The island, huh?" I asked, curious. They wouldn't tell me where I was going. They said it was a secret. "Is that what you call it?" The woman just nodded, the doll-like smile never leaving her lips. "Officially, this island is unnamed and uninhabited," the woman said. "In fact, all traces of it have been scrubbed from the internet. You won't find it on Google Maps or in any publicly available satellite imagery." She leaned forward towards me with heavily mascaraed eyes and ruby red lipstick slashed across her lips. "This is a very special place. Only very special people are allowed here. You should be honored to work here under our savior." "I hope you're talking about Jesus or something," I said jokingly. She just smiled blankly and motioned me forward. "Just follow that trail for a few hundred feet," she said, pointing at an opening in the palm trees where logs were laid down horizontally over the muggy jungle. "And you'll find the mansion." "Good luck." I thought it was a somewhat strange thing to say, wishing a random stranger good luck. But by the end of that night, I realized that simply to make it off this island alive, I would need lots of it. I followed the woman's directions to the back of the brutalist mansion. A heavy metal door stood there with a small bulletproof window built in the top. A tanned, Spanish face glowered out at me, then rapidly drew back and disappeared. A few heartbeats later, the door slid to the side with a grinding of hidden gears. The head of security at the island was a heavily tattooed ex-Marine named Mario. He wore a dark Kevlar vest over a black outfit, making him look like a walking shadow. I found the security had their own private complex in the mansion as he showed me around the site. Hundreds of hidden cameras covered every angle of the mansion and the surrounding parts of the island. Dozens of black-clad security agents swarmed over the screens, checking the monitors and computers constantly. "Quite a setup you have here," I said to Mario, nodding at him. He smacked me on the shoulder, giving a confident grin. "Money is no issue here, Richard," he responded. "Security is paramount. There are things on this island that could rip apart the world if they ever escaped." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" I asked. "Nuclear weapons or something?" He laughed at that. "You'll see for yourself tonight," he said, his dark eyes flashing with something cold and alien. Mario led me and a couple other new hired guns around the island. The place was certainly strange. It reminded me of some combination of a secret Black Ops site and a Playboy billionaire's private heaven. All of the doors in the mansion looked like they were made of thick steel. They had wheels that would spin, like those on a submarine door. The mansion also had no windows at all that I could see, except for the small, shatterproof glass openings on the steel doors. I didn't want to ask too many questions. However, I couldn't resist asking him about a couple small things. However, or at least, they seemed small to me at the time. "What are those hatchways?" I asked Mario, pointing to rectangular covers built into the concrete walkway. They had heavy handles. "Are those manholes or something?" "There are tunnels under the island," he responded vaguely, "just for maintenance and security. You understand?" "Wow, this place is certainly well developed," I said. We came out through a grove of palm trees. A stone walkway led down to a white beach. Dozens of yachts were moored all across the shore, some of them looking like they must have cost hundreds of millions of dollars. "There's a lot of money and power here," Mario said. "That's why it's important you never talk about what you see here. These are the people who control the world. The ones behind the government and the media, not the elected officials who the people see, but the actual power." "Like who?" I asked. "You mean the Rothschilds and Soros?" He laughed again, a sarcastic, grinding laugh that grated my nerves. "Trust me, The truly powerful ones don't even have public personas. If you know their name, then they're just one of the puppets. I just shook my head at that, then asked the real question that had been bothering me since I first arrived here. Who is the savior? I asked. Is that some code name or something? Mario froze in place. He's the one who runs everything here, he whispered conspiratorially, looking around nervously. But don't be mentioning that kind of shit. You'll probably see him tonight anyway. He's the one who runs the show. He'll be on the stage in his normal outfit. By the end of the day, I was suited up like the rest of the security staff, wearing the pure black pants and shirt with the symbol of Moloch engraved over the heart. Hundreds of the world's most famous politicians, actors, businessmen and artists had gathered, streaming in the front doors with a soft, diffident susurration. I stood by the open doorway of a side exit with an AR-15 and full body armor, next to one other soldier. They had also given me a sidearm. Every entrance or exit was manned by at least 2 armed men. The security at this place was some of the most intense I had ever seen. Beyond the door, there were rows and rows of the most comfortable seats, all gathered in a semicircle around a massive stage made of pure mahogany. Blood-red curtains stood closed at the front of the room, concealing their secrets, for now, at least. "Hail Satan!" I heard the elites cry inside in unison. I didn't want to look in at the rows of high-ranking politicians, celebrities, influencers and artists, but my curiosity was high. I peeked around the corner of the stone archway, seeing the red curtains on the stage drawing apart. I saw one of my favorite actors standing in the front row, clapping excitedly and jumping up and down. The crowd cheered as a naked female strapped to an obsidian altar lay there. She was beautiful and blonde, probably no older than 20, with the face of a supermodel. Her mouth was gagged, her arms outstretched like Jesus on the cross. Thin leather cords were tied around her wrists and ankles, biting deeply into the skin. Her eyes rolled wildly as she shook her head from side to side. She froze, and her eyes met mine for a brief moment. I saw the pleading expression there, the mortal terror and absolute horror. A man in a goat mask wearing black robes slunk out from the side of the stage, carrying a wavy silver dagger engraved with strange symbols. The crowd erupted into a primal roar of pleasure and excitement that sounded like it came from one monstrous mouth. "Worthy is the Lamb," the man in the goat mask screamed with electronic amplification. He had a deep voice, as if he had rocks rolling around in his throat. The crowd roared and clapped. Scattered cries of "Hail Lucifer" and "Ave Satanas" echoed down the massive auditorium. "Hey, pay attention," the other security agent at my side said in a thick Finnish accent. He was a tall Scandinavian-looking guy named Colmek. "You're not getting paid to watch the show." New guy. I tried to rip my gaze away from the stage, but it held my attention with an obsessive horror. The burnt bones of children and women have been offered to the Ancient Ones. To Moloch, the man on the stage cried. Under our feet, the burnt bodies of hundreds lay dreaming. This victim will be the 666th. Her blood will bring about the gnosis that we seek. The direct experience of the divine held by the gods, by Lucifer and Moloch and Baal. The roaring of the crowd temporarily drowned out his electronically magnified voice. "Tonight, we will rip open the veil." I had stopped watching the show, instead staring blankly out at the beach and palm trees. At that moment, another black-clad security agent came up to my partner, whispered something in his ear, then immediately disappeared, heading off back in the direction of the main security office. Colmek shook his head grimly. "I'll be right back," he said. "Stay right here. Don't move from this door no matter what, and pay attention." I nodded and watched as he walked off in the same direction. I immediately took the opportunity to continue watching the ceremony. I had missed something important. Apparently, the woman now lay dead on the sacrificial table, a gaping hole in her chest. Blood spurted from the crater as the man in the goat mask held her beating heart, grasped tightly in his hand, letting the blood stream down his naked fingers. The crowd cheered with a rising bloodlust and insanity. Most of them were standing, their eyes gleaming and wide with fanatical adoration. The entire spectacle reminded me of some kind of ancient Aztec ritual, as the woman's sightless eyes stared vacantly up in death. The man in a goat mask pulled out a can of gasoline. The clear liquid gurgled as he upended the canister over her pale, bloodless face, over her naked stomach and long legs. A moment later, he lit a match and dropped it. I heard the whooshing of the flames as they rose up. The crowd went deathly silent as they watched the rippling flames. The man in the goat mask began chanting in some strange language I had never heard before. It sounded Semitic, but I knew it wasn't Arabic or Hebrew. I felt something like electricity ripple through the air, almost like a feeling of falling pressure before a storm. I looked down at the hairs on my arms, seeing them rise up. I looked back up at the stage, and my eyes widened in horror. The flaming body of the sacrificial victim had started to morph before my eyes and the eyes of the crowd. The dripping, blackening flesh jumped up and down, as if there were rats trapped in her body trying to escape the fire. There was a deafening hissing, as if thousands of snakes were being burned alive. The dead woman's arms jerked up, the skin splitting open as if she had seams running along her skin. Something dark and muscular with curving, black talons ripped its way out of the dead, burning flesh. Behind it, a head appeared with long, curving horns and eyes that spun with whirls of fire. It looked like the offspring of a bull and a demon. Its imposing body rose up from the inferno, appearing like magic from the solid stone. It raised itself to its full height, looming over the crowd. The last of the woman's blood hissed and boiled away, her flesh dissolving into ashes. Behold, Moloch rises, the man in the goat mask screamed in a fanatical voice. The crowd's cheering had stopped, though many of the faces in the crowd looked chalk white with terror. The bull god surveyed the crowd, its horns nearly scraping the ceiling 20 feet above the stage. At that moment, I knew death was on its way with eyes of fire and a grin like a skull, ready to reap a field of human bodies. I heard running behind me, but I didn't dare turn away from the horrific sight in front of me. The last of the fire's embers died, sending up thin wisps of grey smoke that spiraled around the bull god's monstrous face. Moloch stood as still as a statue, and if it weren't for one thing, I might have thought it was some sort of sculpture or art project. He had two nostrils like a serpent's. As his great lungs inhaled, the smoke billowed in and out of his mouth and nose. Some of the people at the edges of the crowd had gotten up, hurrying towards the doors. Moloch's head ratcheted to face them, his fiery eyes narrowing into slits. "Do not leave," the man in the goat mask pleaded. "Those who have fear are not worthy of life. Do not prove yourselves unworthy of life." As the first of the fleeing men and women got to within a few steps of the door, Moloch gave a primal roar. In a blur of primal strength, he reached down and ripped the blackened sacrificial altar off the stage. It ripped from the wooden stage with a tremendous crack like a bullwhip. He hurled the heavy mass of stone at those heading towards the opposite exit from the one I guarded. I watched it curve through the air. The people started screaming and clawing to escape as it smashed down on their heads with a grating crash. I could feel the floor shake from where I stood outside. Blood exploded from their smashed bodies. I saw arms and legs jerking and seizing under the heavy stone, but within a few moments, they slowed and then stopped. Others were running towards the door I guarded, but Moloch leapt off the stage in a blur. In a few bounding steps, he reached the pale, terrified faces on the other side of the threshold. His massive clawed hand came down. I heard bones shatter as blood sprayed my face and the wall. Bone splinters and pieces of brain exploded from the screaming bodies. I backpedaled, wiping at my eyes, trying to get the blood off so I could see. No one had told me what to do in this situation. I didn't know if I was supposed to shoot that massive abomination, or if this was all just part of the show. "Richard!" a familiar voice cried from behind me. Panic oozed from every word. I spun, seeing Mario and Colmec standing side by side. their pupils dilated and expressions grim. "We have a major problem." It was Mario. I recognized that voice, the one that sounded as if he had been gargling with rocks. "I know," I said, holding my rifle tightly. I pointed behind me at the scene of rampant death and destruction. I had seen bloodshed and war before, but this was different. The island itself seemed to feel it. The wind, which had been calm when I first landed, now whipped the island in fast, circular currents. The breeze smelled of burnt matches and coppery blood. The static electricity, which had caused the hairs on my arms to rise, rippled over everything with tiny blue flashes, increasing in power by the second. No, not Moloch," Colmeck said, looking much calmer than I felt. "The Savior lets Moloch thin the herd every year." "It's Leviathan," Mario continued grimly, "the beast from the waters. The smell of blood is drawing it from the depths of the ocean. We picked up the first blips on radar a few minutes ago. When it gets here, it won't stop until everything is rubble. It will kill every single person on the island. All security personnel must report to the South Beach immediately." A cool robotic voice cried out over hidden loudspeakers all over the island. The screaming from the auditorium had quieted behind me. I was afraid to look inside. "There it is," Colmeck said, his head jerking up as the emergency alert read. He motioned for me to follow. "It's time to fight." We sprinted over curving trails of smooth logs between deathly quiet forests. All the insects and birds had gone silent. Ahead of us, the palm trees opened up onto the Pacific Ocean, but it was no longer a beautiful tropical blue. A black, swirling whirlpool like an ulcerous wound had opened up on its surface. It stretched hundreds of feet across, drawing closer to the shore by the second. Dead fish, sharks, dolphins, squids, and even whales spun in the filthy, dark water. 20 black-clad security agents waited for the three of us on the beach, their eyes wide, their faces pale with terror. Like myself, they all had AR-15s and Glock 22s with extra magazines for both. I guess the Glock might be useful for blowing my brains out as a last resort if some beast from hell rose out of the simmering waters, but I didn't think it would stop anything from another dimension. The clouds swirled overhead in a thick curtain as black as smoke. Flashes of blue lightning detonated every couple seconds. Mario raised his hands, screaming over the roaring of the wind. Colmeck stood by my side, his face grim and eyes narrowed. "Your job is to fight off anything that tries to get on the island," he said, looking from one face to another with rapt attention. "Nothing can stand against high-caliber rifle fire. Shoot at the face and eyes when it comes up. We've dealt with creatures like this before, and they will retreat if you injure them badly enough." I had the sense of being fed a line of bullshit as my mind processed this. "What exactly is coming up?" one of the doe-eyed security men asked. He barely looked old enough to drink, a young, muscular hulk with a Marine Corps tattoo on his neck. "They call it Leviathan," Mario responded. "Sometimes the rituals here and the smell of blood can draw strange things. Leviathan is one of those. We have encountered it before. The most important thing to remember is..." His voice was suddenly drowned out by a terrible cacophony that came from the center of the black whirlpool. A screech like the detonation of a nuclear missile shook the ground. The ocean jumped and bubbled frantically. The beach heaved and cracked, the white sands disappearing in fissures that opened up like greedy mouths underneath my feet. I lost my balance, falling forwards. The screeching continued, rising into a primal roar. A green dragon head, the color of an infected wound, erupted from the surface of the thrashing water, rising up dozens of feet in the air. It had two enormous slitted eyes that dilated and constricted quickly as it glowered down at us. The screeching abruptly stopped, the pointed mouth of the dragon slamming shut with a sound like a gunshot. Within moments, another cancerous green head shot up in a blur, its skin looking as hard as stone. Ridges that looked as sharp as swords ran the length of its reptilian skull. Arcing over its eyes and pointed snout, more heads erupted from the ocean until all 7 heads of Leviathan loomed over us. Not one of us fired. No one even seemed to breathe as we surveyed the beast across the no-man's land of the white sands. The slitted eyes and yellow irises of the 7 heads had a demonic hunger, a reptilian coldness. Far behind us, I heard distant screams still echoing from the auditorium where Moloch held sway. "Fire!" Mario cried. Instantly, a cacophony of gunshots exploded all around me. I jumped up on my feet, scrambling up as the 7-headed dragon leapt forward. Thousands of gallons of salt water streamed down its massive body as it came up on the beach. Long, black paws with bone-white talons shot out of the surging ocean, followed by a tapering tail like that of a water snake. I brought the rifle up and emptied my magazine as fast as I could, pulling the trigger over and over as I aimed at the many slitted eyes of Leviathan, but the bullets seemed to ping harmlessly off of its hard, obsidian-like scales. It scrabbled onto the shore, the heads coming down in a blur. Rows and rows of vampiric fangs gleamed dully in each of the mouths. One security agent was bitten in half, the spurting stump of his lower body still standing for a long moment, even as the rest of the body disappeared down the throat of the dragon. Mario ran forwards, slamming another magazine in his rifle and opening fire point blank. One of the heads came down in a blur towards him. Its great, staring eyes exploded in a shower of blue blood and thick vitreous fluid. The dragon head pulled back, its mouth opening in a primal scream of agony. As I reloaded, I scanned the area around me, realizing that nearly half of the security agents were either dead or critically injured. I backpedaled away, keeping my eyes on the dragon. It continuously drew forward, killing more of its enemies with every step. I turned and ran into the forest, the sounds of shattering bones and dying men ringing through the air with a sickening clarity behind me. Once I had reached the border of the trail, I heard Mario yell, "Retreat!" behind me, but by that point, it was far too late. "Hey, wait up!" a voice whispered from behind me. I turned my head, seeing Colmec. Spatters of drying blood covered his face and uniform. As far as I could tell, none of it was his. Mario's dead. They're all dead. We need to get out of here. We need to get off the island. How? I asked. Find the Savior, he answered, panting and out of breath. We must find him. He can get us out of here. I don't even know what the guy looks like, I muttered. He was wearing a goat mask. You'll know him when you see him, Colmec said. His body is covered in scars, everything except his face. Stay close to me. We need to watch each other's backs. It's our only chance of survival. A trail of twisted, broken bodies led from the mansion to the surrounding trails and beaches. A decapitated woman with solid gold necklaces embedded with diamonds lay in front of me. It was strange on the island, the way oblivion and ineffable wealth coexisted side by side, but everything was deathly silent, even in the mansion's auditorium. Where's the Savior? I asked through gritted teeth. I peeked my head into the auditorium, but nothing moved. Hundreds of smashed and bloody bodies littered the floor. He's around somewhere, Colmec answered. We started circling the mansion, looking for any signs of life. Colmec went in the lead. As he turned the corner, an enormous black hand with sharp claws of fingers flitted forward in a blur, wrapping itself around his chest. Colmec gave a strangled cry as it closed around him. I heard his bones crush as a spout of blood and gore flew from his mouth and nose, as if he were a toothpaste tube being squeezed. I backpedaled away as Moloch threw the twitching corpse aside like a discarded toy. It smashed into the wall of the mansion, exploding wetly. A human-shaped, bloody stain languidly dripped down the wall above Colmec's mangled body. Moloch slowly turned his head towards me, the fiery eyes flashing with hunger. He gnashed his fangs together, taking a step forward with a leg the size and shape of a tree trunk. With every step he took, I felt the ground tremble. "Stop!" I cried, moving away from the monstrous creature. "Why are you doing this?" "There is no why," he gurgled, his voice monstrous and inhumanly slow. "There is only power. The weak deserve to die. Only the strong are worthy of life. I raised my rifle in a last-ditch effort to save myself. Moloch saw it and started running towards me, every footstep crushing the paved walkway around the mansion into rubble and dust. I aimed for his eyes and nose, emptying the entire magazine as quickly as I could. The bullet smashed into Moloch's face, dark red. Clotted blood dripped out of the wounds, writhing with maggots. Drops of it fell around me, landing on my hair and face. I felt the small larvae twisting all over my skin. Moloch's blood smelled nauseating, like some combination of stink bugs and rotting bodies. He slowed, giving a roar of pain. I turned to run in the opposite direction, but as I looked out in the direction of the beach, my heart dropped. Leviathan was moving in our direction, the giant dragon heads looming over the trees. Quickly, it swept towards me like a dark wind. "You will suffer for that, worthless slave," Moloch growled, wiping blood from his fiery eyes with his sharp talons of fingers. A sudden idea came to me. I ran in the direction of Leviathan. Moloch followed closely at my heels. Only a few steps behind me, Leviathan slithered forward over the sands and trees, its enormous body undulating like a water snake's. I screamed at it, an incomprehensible wail of terror. Its 7 heads snapped towards me. Its slitted eyes widened as it saw Moloch. I heard the crashing of Moloch's footsteps stop behind me, only feet away from crushing me into a paste. His massive lungs breathed quickly, exhaling the odor of sulfur and smoke. "Leviathan," Moloch growled in his demonic voice. "These are my tributes." Leviathan's dragon heads looked straight up at the sun and screamed in response, their many voices rising and falling in a dissonant wail. As I sprinted into the trees, Leviathan and Moloch ran at each other, colliding with an ear-splitting crash. I glanced back, seeing Moloch ripping one of the dragon heads off its neck with his sharp fingers. The head screamed as blue blood exploded from the spurting stump. After a long moment, the neck fell limply forward. The other dragon heads bit Moloch in a unified attack. They ripped deep holes in his shoulders and arms, snapping over and over like rabid dogs. As the 2 eldritch monstrosities attacked each other in fierce combat, I lost sight of them, but the sounds of fighting echoed over the entire island, crashing like lightning. I felt like the survivor of an apocalypse. I couldn't find a single other living person on the island. Hundreds of crushed, broken and decapitated bodies surrounded me. Over the cacophony of fighting, I heard a new noise, the whirring of helicopter blades nearby. It was coming from the other side of the mansion. Frantically, I sprinted around the other side, seeing a Black Hawk helicopter getting ready to leave. A man in black robes sat at the pilot's seat, his grey eyes gleaming and a wide smile plastered across his face. I smashed my fist into the door over and over until he opened it. "Holy shit, you're still alive?" he asked. I hadn't seen this man before. He had a face like a Calvin Klein model, all sharp angles and high cheekbones, perfectly proportioned in every way, but his scalp looked melted and scarred, as if someone had thrown gasoline on his hair and ignited it. His ears were stunted, twisted growths of scar tissue. His hands, too, were covered in deep, folding burn scars. "Are you the savior?" I responded quickly. "Please, get me out of here." "They do call me that," he said wistfully. "The savior. Yes, I guess I am. Get in." The savior stared at me with his strange green eyes, the color of swamps where monstrous things swam under the surface. "Some people just need to learn the hard way," he said. The helicopter took off into a dark night covered with bright, twinkling stars. There is no great power without great responsibility. After all, those of us who seek the Ancient Ones know it comes with a cost. I just stared out the window, gazing down at the countless mutilated, broken bodies that littered the beach. Below us, the face of a bull stared up with eyes of fiery cyclones. The broken, still body of Leviathan lay at his feet. As we made it over the great waters of the Pacific Ocean, the bull god raised a hand and waved. At that moment, I thought I could almost see a hurricane of translucent souls circling around him, spiraling up into the sky. Story 2. Sweater weather. I live on the other end of Washington State. As annoying as it is, you know exactly what I mean by that. I live near Spokane. East Side. You have to love the outdoors if you live here. Outside the city, it's pretty rural. We have some exceptionally beautiful state parks and conservation areas. Hiking, camping, horseback riding, snowboarding, anything outdoorsy we have. I highly recommend taking part in some outdoor activities if you're ever here to visit. However, I don't recommend Riverside State Park. I went hiking there a few months ago, and I had the strongest feeling of being watched I've ever experienced. I couldn't shake it. I only got about a mile in from the trailhead before I turned around. Something wasn't right, and I wasn't sticking around to figure out what. But the feeling grew, and I'm a little embarrassed to admit, when I heard a noise in the underbrush, I broke into a jog, and then a run. It was probably just a squirrel. It didn't sound large, but I was freaked out anyway. I reached the parking area and jumped into my car. I looked back towards the trail, and there was nothing. But I still couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, so I drove away. By the time I was a few yards down, the feeling evaporated. I haven't felt it since, but I've never gone back there. And that's not really a scary story, but it's my story and gives you some context. I don't want to admit I was that chicken shit on a very easy hike. Not more than a few minutes from civilization, but I ask friends sometimes if they had ever had a bad feeling about Riverside State Park. Usually they'd ask what I was talking about, and I'd shrug and laugh and say, I don't know, weird vibes, and the conversation would move on. But yesterday, I was down at the bar with one of my buddies, Alan. He's more of a drinking buddy than a hiking buddy, but he's a good outdoorsman. I think he just prefers to drink with friends and hike alone. I asked him about Riverside State Park. He didn't ask what I meant, just gave me a long level look and said, have you? And normally I think I would have shrugged it off, but there was something about the way he said it, or maybe because I was a couple beers in, but I related to him my story as I explained it to you. It's probably nothing, right? I just got spooked for some reason, I said after I finished. He said, sometimes instinct is the only thing we have that can protect us. If it doesn't feel right, trust your gut. Respect it. If I get a feeling about a place, I pack up and go. Doesn't matter if it's the middle of the night. Better to feel a little foolish tomorrow than be dead and feel nothing at all. It was a surprisingly grim take from a normally cheerful guy. Of course I had to pry a little. Packed up in the dark. How often does he get weird vibes? He didn't like all the questions, so he answered my original one about Riverside State Park instead. He still goes sometimes, but he stays alert and he doesn't camp there. His story is as follows, as best as I can remember. I've been lots of times. I was doing my usual loop towards the equestrian area, and I got this weird feeling like I was being watched. There is always the possibility you run into a bear, or worse, a man. I'm kidding. So I put my arms out and tried to walk as tall as possible and started humming a tune to myself. I'm about as hairy as a bear, so I figured the humming meant it wouldn't mistake me for one and try to say hello. Haha. I still felt a pricking at the back of my neck, though, and I glanced back a few times, but there was nothing. If anything, the feeling grew. I walked on a little farther, and I saw a tree had fallen across the trail up ahead. It was leaning against another tree, so the angle was pretty steep, and the area over the trail was about at head height. If you were going to pass, you'd duck under it, not climb over it. I stopped dead, heart racing, the way you do when you see when someone startles you. I saw a person lying face down on the log, head pointed down towards the roots and feet up towards the canopy, which was a weird position to be in, even if you were screwing around. It was too high up to be someone trying to climb over. They would have had to climb up the tree from off the side of the trail and then turn around and lay down on it. Their leg was twisted at a strange angle. What the hell were they doing? Was it a dead body? After a second, though, my brain actually processed what it was seeing. I laughed because I realized someone must have thrown their sweater up there for some reason. Unexpected, but not scary. There was an arm and a hood visible. There was a branch jutting out from the tree where a leg would be, so the whole thing had the general shape of a person if you squinted. I stopped for a second and put my hands on my knees, laughing and letting my heart slow down, until I heard a sound coming from the tree. I looked up and the sweater was moving, not like cloth moving in the wind, like had arms and was moving. I realized the feeling of being watched had never really gone away. In fact, it was more intense than ever. I didn't like what was going on one bit, so I turned and started running. I didn't know what the sweater thing was, but I wasn't sticking around to find out. After a moment, I heard a thump behind me, way too loud to be a sweater falling, way too loud. I didn't look. I just ran. I was pounding the ground with my feet. My heart was thudding in my chest, and I was gasping for air. But over all the racket I was making, I could hear it behind me from time to time, whipping a branch in its path, knocking a loose stone out of place. I have pretty good reflexes, I think, because I left it a fair ways behind me when I bolted, but it was gaining. I could tell. I was trying to pump my legs faster, throw myself forwards with every step. But there's only so much a person can do. Luckily, the trails there are pretty clear, and the area I was in didn't have any really treacherous stretches of tree roots that would sprain an ankle instantly at the speed I was going. But still, even at my top speed, it was gaining on me little by little. I kept running. It was a harrowing couple of minutes. I could feel myself slowing as the adrenaline wore off. I was barely thinking, but I regretted not having a weapon. I couldn't stop to pick up a stick. All I had besides my fanny pack was my windbreaker tied around my waist. So I did the only thing I could do. I waited until the thing got closer, close enough that I couldn't miss. And I pulled my windbreaker off and threw it at the thing's head. I don't know what I was expecting. To blind it, I guess. Distract it. It was a stupid plan. But the stupidest part is it worked. It stopped. I don't know what it was doing. I just turned around and ran. Ran as hard and as fast as I could. It was tough though, because I was winded. I scared the shit out of a guy. I came barreling down the trail as he was coming up it. I screamed, "Turn around! We gotta go. We gotta go." And he turned and ran with me. I slowed to jog at this point. I didn't hear it behind me and I was breathing hard. "You see anything behind me?" I wheezed. "No," the guy said, trotting along beside me. "What is it?" "A mountain lion." I just pumped my arms harder. I had a track coach in school who said that helps with running, but I think he was full of shit because it didn't help at all. We ran until we got to the camping area, at which point I collapsed. I figured with this many people around I'd be safe. One of them would have a gun or, they say you only have to outrun the slowest person in a group. I'm kidding. But seeing all the people made me feel normal, like I had re-entered reality. The guy wandered off, and I lay flat on my back in the grass in a meadow, catching my breath. I did overhear a weird conversation. A young mother was leading her kid along. The kid didn't want to go, but the mom said, "It's about to rain. We need to pack up all our stuff." I was staring up at the sky and it was perfectly clear. There wasn't any rain forecasted either. I had checked before I came. I rolled my head to the side to get a view of the camp, and there was a lot of activity. A lot of people taking down tents. Not many setting up. It was unusual for the time of day and the time of year. If I had to guess, I kind of think everyone there felt spooked. The guy came back. He had begged a bottle of water off somebody and gave it to me. "Thanks, man," I said. I downed half the bottle in one go. "Weird vibe around here," the guy said. "Yeah." What was out there?" "I don't know," I said, but it scared the hell out of me. He nodded as if that made sense. "Should we call someone?" "I don't think so. I don't have much to tell them, really." I didn't even want to tell this guy, who had seen me in my fear and fury, and was at the camp now, that I'm pretty sure I was chased by an animate sweatshirt. I mean, it sounded fucking ridiculous. At a police station, it would sound even worse. I haven't told anyone about it until now. "Oh," I said. We nursed our beers in silence. After a minute, I asked, So when you threw the sweater at it, you turned all the way around. Yep, he sighed. So you saw it? Yep. What was it? I mean, it couldn't have just been a sweater, since it sounds like this thing had legs. I don't know, Alan said. Well, what did it look like? I don't know, he repeated. When I try to remember it, all I remember is that goddamn sweater. Black. Hood strings. Front pocket. Totally nondescript sweatshirt, but I remember it perfectly. When I try to remember who or what was wearing it, my memory gets fuzzy and it's hard to focus. I don't think it was human, or I mean earthly. I don't think it was an alien. I just think it's not a thing a person is supposed to see. Or maybe it's not a thing a person can see. I don't know why it picked a goddamn sweater. To blend in, I suggested, and we had a good laugh. I'll tell you what though, I think it's still out there, and I think somebody knows. They're closing the park this year and into next. Certain areas and certain times. I bet it's related. Would you ever go back? I asked. Oh, sure. I've been back a few times. Really? I mean, most of the time it's fine. If there are weird vibes, I turn around and go home, or to a different trail. Haven't run into anything since. You're a braver person than me, I said. I don't know about that, Alan said. I get pretty nervous sometimes, out of the blue. I never used to. Think I need to see a shrink about my anxiety? No, I said. You seem fine to me. I gave Alan a lift home. There wasn't much to say after that story. As we drove in silence, I started to get that feeling again, in the dark enclosed space of the car, with the streetlights flashing by few and far between. I kept imagining if a figure was behind us in the back seat. I kept flicking my eyes to the rearview mirror to make sure there was nothing there. I turned on the radio. We chatted a bit, and then I was pulling up to his house. He got out and I watched him go inside. I caught a flutter of motion as I was pulling away. His neighbor had left a windbreaker draped over their porch railing. It was neon-colored and caught the light as it stirred slightly in the wind. Story 3. My new neighbor has been watching me from my closet. I had hauled up the last of my belongings to my new apartment. I dropped my black trash bag full of clothes on the floor and surveyed the bare surroundings of my new home. The walls were beige with stray stains randomly dotted from God knows what, from the previous tenants that the owners didn't finish cleaning. The carpet had a coarseness that I could feel even beneath the thick soles of my shoes and gave off the faint aroma of cigarette smoke. There was going to be a lot of work for me to make this dingy unit somewhat habitable. A day later, I was already feeling buyer's remorse for taking this place immediately. Either the property owners were trying their best to unload this dump as quick as they could, or I was desperate enough to sign off on it, thinking that it wouldn't be so bad. The feeling changed when I had a good look at my new neighbor living right next door to me. She turned to greet me, and I immediately averted my gaze downward. I certainly found her attractive, but my natural shyness took over. She stopped me, and I somehow managed to look her in her beautiful hazel eyes that almost hypnotized me. I said, "You just moved here, right?" she asked me, while I marveled at the melody in her speaking voice. Yeah. Yes, I did," I stammered, the words almost stalling in my throat. Being an introverted person, I'm not used to people randomly talking to me on the rare moments it does happen. But when it's a beautiful person like she was, my anxiety becomes hard to manage. And yet, here she was, talking to me and even giving me a perfectly pearly white smile. Before I knew it, I extended my arm for her and "I'm Josh," slipped out, and I cursed myself in my mind. Now she had to think you're a weirdo, I thought. She grabbed my hand and shook it, the skin of her palm radiating a warmth that traveled through and up my arm. "Hi, I'm Lena," she told me. She looked back at me, and I attempted to smile back despite my embarrassment. I was suddenly glad to be on good terms with my new neighbor, but I worried about coming off as too obvious, and I told her, well, See you later. I timidly ended. I beat my head against the door, cursing myself stupid, 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 like a lovesick high schooler who ended any chance with the biggest crush he ever had. After that, I expected she'd never talk to me again, not even looking my way again. So when she showed up at my door with a bag of takeout, to say I was surprised would be the biggest understatement in my lifetime. Just wanted to surprise you with some excellent food. I spent all day making it. She winked as she said this, and I felt my face almost burn red. We got to know each other over the next couple hours, and little by little, I opened up to her, which was a first for me. I still felt a little reserved, but I could relax knowing that she didn't think I was a complete dork. I even cracked a few lame jokes, and she laughed like she was watching me perform stand-up. It seemed like it ended so quick and she left. She promised she'd see me soon. Even though I was left alone in my less than stellar living space, I was glad for such great company. I went to sleep later, my bed situated right across from my closet. My closet was empty, aside from the few shirts I had hanging inside, and the door was shut. This was a superstition I had that I never quite grew out of. It was in the early morning hours, when I had just randomly woken up, that I heard it. I realized what it was, and my sleepy eyes had bulged out of my sockets. From across my bed, I could hear the faint but unmistakable rhythm of breathing. There was someone in my room, just across my bed. I pulled my blankets closer like it was a shield protecting me from the intruder. I didn't dare move, didn't dare to breathe, praying that whoever was here would just walk away. My alarm clock sat next to me, its soft green glow the only source of illumination in my room, and I was desperately hoping it wasn't bright enough to expose my face. The minutes ticked by slowly, while the pounding in my heart grew rapidly and harsher with every changing second. All the while, the breathing never faltered or grew louder, just the steady exchange of oxygen of someone overlooking my sleeping form. The minutes ticked by for what felt like a long eternity with no change. I was summoning enough courage to try to look in the direction of my intruder. I turned my eyes over, and my fears were confirmed. From what I could make out in the darkness, my closet door was not closed like it was, but wide open. Inside, I could make out the crouched form of a person sitting, watching me from across my room. I wanted to scream, to confront this person, but my fear kept me paralyzed and had my vocal cords in a stranglehold. All I could do was lay there as this figure stayed hunched over and breathing. I don't know how I managed to fall back asleep. I woke up to the sun's rays breaking through the window, the dawn being a welcome sight. I looked back at my closet, and it was closed. Just like how I left it the previous night, I took a moment to calm down and rationalize that it was just a nightmare. Maybe a case of that sleep paralysis that I heard about online. It took me a while to get myself out of bed and out for my routine. I got to work, operating on autopilot throughout the day. I finally made it home, and Lena was walking opposite of me. "How was your first night?" she inquired and looked at my sleepy, deprived face. "You look like you didn't sleep well." I wanted to tell her about the weird dream I had, and maybe get a hug from her while she tells me it's going to be all right. I just, had a rough night, first night jitters, and all. As I said this, my eyes kept darting between her and off to the side. As much as I wanted to admire her, I felt so intimidated being in her presence, and I didn't feel worthy to. "Well, I won't be out long, so let me know if you need anything." She waved delicately as he walked away. I was glad for her offer, and I tried to put the whole nightmare out of my mind completely. I was going to bed again later that night, and I made sure the closet door was shut. No way it could open from the inside, right? There was nothing else inside either. No way this could happen again. I woke up the same time in the night, and I felt dread flood in my body as I again heard the soft breathing from my closet. My eyes darted, and this time I dared to move my whole head toward my closet. Door wide open, the intruder hunched over inside. My breathing became quick and shallow, as if all oxygen in my room was depleted. I stared down at whoever was in my closet as they coolly remained still. I froze like a deer watching upcoming headlights of imminent demise as I waited for this nightmare to charge at me. But it never did. They just kept sitting there, breathing softly. The reality had set in that this wasn't a nightmare, that there was a person sitting in my closet, watching me from the shadows. I watched for hours until I noticed the dawn begin to bleed into my bedroom. In that half a second I looked away. The figure had vanished. This time, the closet door was still open, a sign that this was in fact real. I walked inside for any other indication that someone was inside during the night. There was nothing there. I was both so afraid because I had an intruder staring at me from my closet and frustrated at myself for being too afraid to do anything. I decided to do something about it, and I would catch whoever it was in the act. I had gone in search of anything that would help me, and I settled on a modest setup that hopefully would help me out. I picked the last item I needed when I felt a hand grip my shoulder, and I had nearly jumped 10 feet in the air. Whoa, sorry about that. Lena greeted me with her usual vibrance. Didn't mean to scare you like that. Just trying to say hi. Oh, that's all right, I said, trying to get my heart rate to slow down. I'm not great when people sneak up on me like that. Oh, well, that's a problem, because sneaking up on people is what I do best, she said with a sly smirk. She was devious, but I couldn't help finding it cute. She walked around with me for a while, and being in her presence made me forget about everything for a bit. I genuinely didn't want to go back to my apartment with whoever waited for me to fall asleep. I wanted to keep talking to Lena, get to know her even more, get her to like me more. Regretfully, we had to part ways, and she promised that we'd meet up again soon. Back in my room, I set up my makeshift surveillance system. A camera and a motion-activated light had to do, but it turned out to be all I needed. I had everything ready by the time I went to sleep, until I'd woken moments ago. I woke up to a brightness in my eyes, and the breathing again. My camera was pointed right in view of my closet and was recording whoever was inside and had a light on them. I primed myself to finally confront the intruder, call 911, and that would be the end of it. I bolted upright, ready to defend myself, and immediately my confidence shattered and my resolve was drained when I saw who was inside. Lena had been squatting in my closet in plain view, glowering at me in a way I had never seen her do, or thought she was capable of. I would say it's Lena I'm looking at, but at the same time it's not. The way she was hunched over. Her skeletal legs were elongated. Her arms were just as long and taut around her forearms and ended in 5 sharp blades of her fingernails. Her face, oh God. Her face, as I'm looking at it now, is straight from my nightmares. Her grin looks horseshoe-shaped. It's stretched impossibly long across her face. Her eyes have a malice to them, a predator toying with its food in prolonged torture before devouring it whole. I'm watching her now as she keeps staring back at me. She's standing straight up. She's impossibly tall, the top of her head nearly touching the ceiling. She's walking towards me. Strands of drool are hanging off her teeth. Help me. Story 4. My dad was military, so we had to move the summer before my senior year in high school. I wasn't taking it well. Senior year is supposed to be special, graduation parties, prom, senior pranks. Instead, my senior year became memorable for a far darker reason, one that still keeps me up at night. Once school started, I kept to myself, sitting in a secluded area inside, next to the cafeteria, before the bell rang. I didn't know anyone, so I figured, why not? About 2 weeks in, I noticed it. One Monday morning, someone had drawn a doodle on the wall next to my chair. Next to the doodle was a speech bubble, like in a comic book. It simply said, "Hello." The doodle was basic, a circular head with black eyes and a big toothless smile, stick figure arms waving. I thought it'd be funny to write back, so I pulled out a Sharpie and wrote, "Hello." That was all. The next day, I returned to my spot and, to my surprise, someone had written back. It read, "Nice to meet you. What's your name?" Weirdly, There was no trace of my previous writing. I wrote my name, and thus began our correspondence. The person would ask basic questions, and I would answer. Whenever I asked anything about them, they simply wrote, "I'm your friend." The doodle itself changed slightly each time, sometimes a thumbs up, sometimes a wink. I was amazed at how clean the doodle looked every time. I thought maybe the janitor was writing to me and painting over the wall to reply. The following Monday, things got weird. That morning, the doodle wasn't smiling. It had angry eyebrows and hands on its hips. The text read, "Where were you?" It caught me off guard. Did this person come back over the weekend to continue talking? I wrote back, "It was the weekend." WTF? At lunch, I decided to eat at my spot. I looked over at the doodle, expecting it to have the same text from the morning, but it had changed again. It read, "Don't leave me again. Friends don't leave friends." I thought whoever was writing to me was either kidding or taking this too seriously. I wrote back, "Goodbye," with a sad face. That was the last time I replied. I avoided that area out of annoyance, hoping the artist would get the hint. I made a couple of friends and started hanging out with them in the morning. After a couple of weeks, I nearly forgot about the doodle, but then it came back. One morning, I opened my locker to find it completely trashed. On the back wall of the locker was that damn doodle, more detailed this time, with teary eyes. The text read, "Why did you leave me?" We were friends. Whoever this was had taken it too far. I told my new friends, and they wanted to see it. When I opened my locker, everything was clean. They thought I was messing with them, but I was unnerved. How did they do that? I grabbed everything from my locker and never used it again. The following week, in second period, I got scared. I walked into class to see students gathered around my desk, talking frantically. Someone had scribbled all over my desk, "You're a bad friend." In the middle of the desk was a squashed cockroach. The way it was killed made it look like the doodle. I spoke with my teacher and told her everything. She asked me to show her the doodle, but it was gone from every place it had been. I felt like a freak. People moved on from the desk incident after a few days, and I kept my head low. My friends were a good distraction as we joked around and talked about anime. I never mentioned the doodle to them again. Several weeks passed without incident. I thought it was over, but there was one more encounter. During fourth period, I went to the bathroom. No one else was there. When I closed the stall door, there it was again. This time, the doodle was more detailed, screaming and clawing at its face. The words, "I'll kill you," were scrawled all over the door. I'd had enough. I grabbed toilet paper and tried to wipe it off. The smear turned red, like blood. No matter how much I wiped, the red ink remained. It looked like I was smearing blood all over the door. My hand was covered in red ink. I ran to the sink, but the more water and soap I used, the larger the red stain became. I looked like my hand was bleeding. I grabbed a paper towel, but it just stained it. The stain made me run home. The paper towel had the doodle's screaming face in red ink. It took a long time to clean my hands completely. I now hated going to school. Every day, I was scared of what I might find. The bathroom showed no sign of ink, red or black. But one day, at my second period desk, there was a note in the corner. "I'm sorry, goodbye," with a small broken heart next to it. That was the last note I ever received from my mysterious pen pal. At the beginning of the next semester, I saw another student writing something on the wall where I used to sit. Was this my stalker? I went over to confront him, but then I saw the doodle, just as it had been. He was writing back to it. I wanted nothing to do with that, so I left. 3 weeks later, that boy was reported missing. He just disappeared one day. One morning, walking to first period, I stopped to tie my shoe near my old spot. I looked at the wall. The doodle was there, but with another one next to it. I got closer and thought, that looks like the missing guy. The second doodle was screaming. The text above them read, "Do you want to be our friend?" Thank you for venturing into the darkness with us. If you dare to explore further, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more spine-tingling tales of horror and the supernatural. Remember, the shadows hold endless mysteries, waiting to be unveiled. Stay tuned for more bone-chilling stories as we continue to traverse the eerie depths of the unknown together. Until next time, may your dreams be free from the haunting echoes of our tales. Or perhaps not.